I understand what you're saying is to make food just or fair or sustainable, there's a triple bottom line where it's good for the people, it's good for the land, and good for
the economy.
Consuming it, and
the economy.
So it's actually four. Did I understand your equation right there?
It's three: people, the economy, and the ecology.
Okay. And so how does that actually play out? Can you give an example?
Yep. So this is how it plays out. When you think of the conventional food system, again, just to wrap up the understanding of it, currently, in the winter, in Minnesota, a head of lettuce that comes from all over the world except Minnesota, some, what do you call them, hydroponic farms, but very few of them around here. So anyway, it takes around 36 units of energy to get us 1 unit of energy. So if you think of calories, it takes 36 calories for us to get 1 out of that lettuce. Think of it this way. Well, in the conventional overall system, it's calculated that it takes 15 units of energy, in average, to produce 1, when you look at corn, soybeans, and all that stuff out there. This is the way I think about it. If you receive a check for $100 for your work, and you have to return 15 times that much to your employer, would you work for that employer? That's technically what we're doing. We are taking 15 units of energy out of the ecology, delivering 1 to us, and we expect it to sustain us, and we expect it to keep going. It is no coincidence that we have to wreck the environment, exploit people, structurally limit some, and do all of these things we have to do to be able to subsidize a system of such deficiency. That's the foundation of the equation. So how do we make it practical then? Okay, here's one thing. We started our system design with something that would produce energy. Vegetables consume energy. Other kinds of systems of crops that are food also consume energy. So if you're going to consume it, you first have to produce it. If you can't produce it, you shouldn't engage in that. It's sort of our fundamental principle. Now, within that, and in your handout, you will see why poultry. The question of why poultry. It isn't because we're in love with chickens or anything like that. Okay? This is because if you look at the population we're trying to address in the context of building the people first part of the equation, it is Hispanics we're trying to change the conditions for as a first line of approach to the system thinking, the system redesign. You can't really redesign a system without engaging those who are locked up in a system that comes back and at the front end competes with anything else that comes out. So we couldn't go out there and start a farm and expect to compete delivering $3 a pound chicken or $2 a pound head of lettuce when someone else who's exploiting and destroying everything can come over and sell it for 25 cents on the dollar. You can't compete in the long term. You can't develop a system that can compete with that. So what we said was, okay, maybe it will take generations, but we have to start from the right place. And the right place is to address those conditions of injustice and discrimination and so on and so forth for that population that is feeding the conventional system as a first step. How do we do that? Well, poultry happens to be part of our culture in Latin America. We know how to do poultry sustainably, free-ranged, and like I said recently, we're going to try a system for feeding poultry without feed, without conventional feed. We're going to go back to the grain basis of mixing the proper mixes and all of that so that we can grow them the way for 5 generations we had done it back in Guatemala. The way I say is, you know what? 5 generations before me grew chickens perfectly healthy back in Guatemala. I was the first one who knew that there was feed somewhere to be fed it to the chickens. So now we have to redesign this whole thing, yes, because it's more intense, because we need more amount of food and all that stuff for the poultry. But it isn't as if it is not doable. So if you think of it from that perspective, that is the most compatible approach to engaging this population. But here's the larger picture. It's a $21.5 billion industry in the meat market alone. It's about $1 billion in Minnesota alone, retail value. It's about $375 million wholesale value. And the 4 main counties here that consume the most poultry, 5% of that total consumption is around $18 million. So it doesn't matter how small our little efforts are today. They are not designed to be small. As we build this movement, as you were talking about, and as consumers come to these new paths of reaching to producers, and producers feel confident that they are respected and all of this starts flowing, there is really no limit how far we can go. We gotta be realistic and know our limitations and be able to stick to that so that we can actually grow on a steady and safe pace. But we don't have to be limited. So that's the new equation. How specifically it materializes? Well, you take poultry. So we figured we're not gonna design a system for everything, for cattle, for sustainable pigs, sustainable this and that, maybe later, but we had to start with something that is powerful enough, big enough, but is the most compatible with this population we're trying to address, and it's also connecting to everybody. You know, chicken is one of the healthiest meat choices. It's also starting to replace beef at this point, and it's starting to grow so much that beef is starting to lose ground to it. So we know where the trends go, and that's where the opportunity is identified. So if we take that, we figured if we can design a system that is scalable for poultry, then we have a way to replicate it and multiply it as many times as we can. And it starts the same way almost any other business enterprise starts. You create a unit of production. And a unit of production, then you multiply it into something bigger so that you create economic units, which is really what a family farm is. And then the family farm, economic unit, then gets clustered so that we can create the institutions to provide the financial, technical assistance, and all of those other services that for a production unit or for an economic unit are not really sustainable from the standpoint of the economic equation.
So I want to hold you there for a minute because I'm trying to reach back and translate because it's been a long time since I've taken economics. So break down the economic units and so just tell me the story about how this works on an individual level. Because
Okay, let's get into one example.
Yeah.
We have just starting to, let's put it this way. We will be graduating on Saturday, 24th, 21 new entrepreneurs that came out of our training program, and those entrepreneurs were walked through this process. Some of them participated in building it, and this is the way it works. And in this case, let me give you the case of Victor. Victor Torres came in about 3 years ago, started in the community gardens, and got engaged with local restaurants, lost a lot of his crop because they didn't have a market. Second year, he did better. Third year, which is this year, he's doing a lot better and getting involved with this. So what is the process for him? The unit is designed so that if maximized in production, can produce up to 1,500 chickens per round. All free range, meaning there is no food inside buildings, none of those things. The building is designed on a modular basis, so that for Victor, for example, he comes in with $600, $700, maybe $1,000 of cash. He can build an 8-foot section of that modular unit. Altogether is 80 feet, 10 sections by 14 feet, which is pretty standard dimensional number you can buy at Menards. So that's the sort of building production unit. That production building is associated with 2 paddocks, one of one size and one of a bigger size for the different size as the birds grow. Mm-hmm. And that is technically a production unit. And then we put perennial crop systems on each side. We are testing cherries, apples, and hazelnuts for nut production as well, where the poultry is grown. So technically, when Victor comes into this, he can be walked through this process, or anybody can be walked through this process, but also that design is compatible with his current conditions, mm-hmm. which is the critical thing. If we were just in the business of raising chickens, we would be millionaires by now, because we could be putting these units of production as fast as we can. In fact, there's a fellow in Glenwood who, that's what he wanted to do. He wanted us to train his people to do this, because he was interested in the system, just not in the purpose. Mm-hmm. It is the purpose that we are pursuing here what makes the difference. And that design now meets that purpose right in the middle, and that purpose is met with that family in mind.
And remind us what that purpose is. That purpose is to support him and his family.
The purpose is to support him and his family, so that he doesn't have to go and labor in a factory where his talents, his assets, and his capabilities are diminished to the minimum denominator. That's at the end the purpose. Now, that situation multiplied by how many hundreds of times has the seed to create not only the revolution you're talking about, but also to redesign the system.